Every new BMW carries a huge weight of expectation, but few cars are weighed down quite so heavily as a new 3 Series. But here it is, codenamed G20. It's lighter but bigger than the one before, and it gets a new suspension setup and it's packed with new tech inside. But the 3 Series is BMW's longest running model, so it would be risky to stray too far from its winning formula. That means the long-running theme of a well-packaged, sporty rear-wheel drive saloon remains front and centre of its ethos. But just how good is it compared to its main rivals, the Mercedes-Benz C-Class and the Audi A4? Does it really come straight in at the top of the class? Well, keep watching to find out. And if you want to buy a new 3 Series or any other new car, head to whatcar.com where we can help you buy a new car with a huge saving off its list price. This is the new BMW 3 Series, so that means that you want to know how well it drives. Well, the answer is very. Until now, the Jaguar XC was the far purer choice for keen drivers in this class, but the new 3 Series is every bit as good, if not better. The steering is truly exceptional, and actually the best that BMW's delivered since electric power steering became the norm. The steering is quite quick off the straight ahead, which can actually take some getting used to, but once you've dialed into it, you'll begin to appreciate that this is a beautifully sensitive steering setup, and it's actually the best in the class. Body control is excellent as well, so in a C-Class that tends to lean more in the bends and generally take a bit more time to settle after quick changes of direction. But in the new 3 Series, actually it has incredible agility, so it corners flatter and it will happily zip from left to right very easily. But of course it's not all about handling in this class. There are other things to consider, like the engines. So the 320d is expected to account for the vast majority of sales in the UK, and the 320d gets a 2-litre 4-cylinder diesel engine that produces 187 brake horsepower, and it is just the ticket if you want the best balance of performance with economy. If you want a diesel engine but with a bit more power, then it's worth bearing in mind that there's a 6-cylinder 330d on the horizon. If you're after petrol power, then you'll need to look at the 254 brake horsepower 2-litre engine of the 330i. If performance is more of a concern than economy, it's worth considering. There's also a range-topping M340i with a mighty 369 brake horsepower 3-litre straight 6. It's seriously rapid, nearly as fast as the previous generation's M3, and makes a great sound too. But of course, it pushes the price up quite a lot. You get a 6-speed manual or an 8-speed automatic gearbox, but actually we can see why the auto is going to be a much bigger seller, and that's because it is incredibly responsive and razor sharp with its shifts, much more so than an A4's gearbox. As for the ride, it's a bit of a mixed bag with the 3 Series. Now, if you prefer a car that's soft and wafty, then the 3 Series isn't for you. But if you prefer a car that is firmer with a bit more control, then actually there's a lot to like about the ride in the 3 Series. The best riding versions we've tried so far have been those on the standard suspension with 18-inch wheels, and they sit just on the right side of comfort. But it's also worth bearing in mind that in a C-Class, that has a more forgiving and relaxing ride, while an A4 on optional adaptive suspension is even better still. M Sport models get stiffer passive suspension as standard, but while it's better controlled, the impacts over sharp imperfections are even more pronounced. You can delete M Sport suspension for free though, and you can also add pricey adaptive dampers. In terms of refinement, the 3 Series has a quiet interior. The 320d is a hushed engine that doesn't sound gruff, and actually wind noise is well contained. Road noise is slightly more noticeable than it is in an A4, and also suspension noise is more pronounced in the 3 Series. The new 3 Series interior is very hard to fault, so everything from the driving position, visibility, infotainment system is among the very best of what you'll find in the class. And it looks great too. The materials have a real good quality look to them, all over the dash, the materials look nice, but the only thing is that actually an A4 feels slightly more premium. But overall, quality inside the 3 Series is absolutely excellent. Now, the driving position, it's very good. There's plenty of adjustment in the seat and in the steering wheel too, loads of adjustment. But the only thing is that the pedals are actually offset quite a bit to the right. Now, it is a bit annoying, but it's also something that is equally as noticeable in an A4 or a C-Class. As for visibility, there's absolutely no problem with the view out the front. It's very good, very clear, but saloons typically aren't very good to see out the back of, and the 3 Series is no exception to that. But the good thing is you get front and rear parking sensors, you get a reversing camera, and you get parking assistant, which actually finds you a parking space and steers you into it, all as standard. Now, what about infotainment? So you get an 8.8-inch touchscreen infotainment system, and if you go for an M Sport model, that goes to a bigger 10.3-inch screen. But regardless of the size, it's absolutely packed with features. And as we've come to expect with BMWs over the years, it has brilliant hardware that's backed up by software that's been very well thought through. It is pin sharp in its responsiveness on this touchscreen, so it's very easy to use when you're parked. But actually, if you're on the move, then you want to be using this rotary dial down here. This is classic iDrive, and really it's great that it's still here. You've still got this rotary dial and physical shortcut buttons as well. But you also get a voice command system that works in a similar way to Amazon's Alexa or Apple Siri. And all you have to do to activate it is say, "Hey BMW."
Hello, what can I help you with?
So that is a handy feature to have as well. And actually, this infotainment system is the best that you'll find in the class. The touchscreen is very responsive, much more so than the laggy one that you get in the C-Class. And it's only really the A4 that comes close to being as good as this infotainment system. But with the A4, it doesn't get a touchscreen, and the screen that it does get isn't quite as crisp and clear as the one in the 3 Series. But what about space up front? Well, you get slightly more legroom than you do in a C-Class and in an A4, and headroom is very generous, and it's a nice wide interior as well. As for the glove box, it's a bit on the small side, but that's not quite so bad because you've got these other generous storage compartments, and the door bins as well are decent size, and they're partitioned, which is quite helpful. So what about space in the back? Well, compared to its premium rivals, it's very impressive back here. And actually, headroom is very similar to what you'd get in the back of an A4, but actually legroom is a little bit more generous. And compared to a C-Class overall, there's more space in the back of this 3 Series. So compared to its premium rivals, it's very impressive. But it's worth bearing in mind that actually there are cheaper rivals, like the Skoda Superb and the Volkswagen Passat, that do offer much more space. So if space is your absolute priority, it might be worth considering them as well. But what about the boot? In terms of size, it's very similar as to what you'd get in an Audi A4, but it's slightly bigger than the Mercedes C-Class. The 3 Series as well has a more squared off and practical shape than the Mercedes. And 40-20-40 split folding rear seats come as standard, and if you want to put those down, there are some levers in the back here that you pull, and slightly annoyingly, you have to go into the back and haul them down yourself. First world problems, I know, but the good news is, when they are down, that the floor is pretty flat all the way through. There aren't really any awkward lumps or bumps in the boot floor. So compared to its premium rivals, the 3 Series has a really impressive boot. The 3 Series is priced slap bang in the middle between the slightly cheaper A4 and the mildly more expensive C-Class. For company car drivers, the 320D has impressively low CO2 emissions, so it's actually in a lower benefit-in-kind tax bracket than all of its key rivals. And it also should return impressive fuel economy. As for the trims, SE gets tri-zone climate control, cruise control, and heated seats. It's an impressive kit list for an entry-level trim, but actually our favourite is Sport, which gets a slightly racier look and leather interior. Most people are going to buy M Sport models. Now, M Sport is a trim that's difficult to recommend objectively because you get slightly sportier looks, but not much else for a fair bit more money. And really, it's important that you try it before you buy it because the ride is very firm. So if you are desperate for an M Sport model, then it might be worth considering getting rid of the M Sport suspension, which you can do for free, or adding the optional adaptive M Sport suspension. BMW came 17th of 32 in our latest reliability survey, so not outstanding. However, you get a 3-year warranty with no mileage cap as standard. As for safety, all versions come with a good range of active safety features, including autonomous emergency braking. We would, though, recommend adding the optional Driving Assistant Plus pack, which adds lane keeping assist, blind spot monitoring, and cross-traffic alert. That pack also adds adaptive cruise control with steering assistance and a stop-start function to help take the stress out of traffic jams. The new BMW 3 Series is outstanding to drive, has a brilliant interior with a superb infotainment system, and if you pick a 320D, it should prove relatively cheap to run as well. It's a car that comes straight into the top of the class and moves the standard on to even greater heights. To read our full extended review of the BMW 3 Series and all of its key rivals, head to whatcar.com. And if you want to buy a new car, go to the new car buying section while you're there to see how much money you could save without the hassle of haggling. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel to keep up to speed with all the latest new car reviews.